Hello, this is Property Matters, a weekly catch-up on the world of property supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. And we're live every week, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn and our website, propertymatterstv.co.uk. If you're watching on the website, leave us a Google review, and if you're watching on the socials, get involved in the conversation below. Our email address for stories is hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk. And there's a podcast of the show, which if you would like to take us on the move with you, you can get from Monday mornings at 10 a.m. on the platforms that you can see over on the other side of the screen. So let's take a look at this week's property news with our property expert, Joe Joshi. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Paul. Good morning to all our viewers and listeners, wherever you are.
Okay, it's a subject that we haven't really touched a lot on in the history of Property Matters, and that is doing up property. Doer-uppers or fixer-uppers, I think they can be called, and we've got some hot spots that Rightmove have basically said these are the places, if you want to go and find a bargain and do it up yourself, these are the places to go. And of course, we're a nation of Instagram lovers who go and look at properties, and all these high-end estate agents show us around these £1 million properties, and they walk through with their camera and everything, and they show us all the scatter cushions and the tester pot deliberations that have gone on. But the truth of the matter is that at the end of the day, you've got to roll up your sleeves and get involved in that process, and it can be a lot more difficult than you think. But I think we're all rather drawn in by the glamour of what the end result's going to look like. I mean, just before we go into those particular hotspots where you might buy a bargain, let's just talk about the doer-upper concept in its basic form, Joe. Let's just talk about what are the do's and don'ts about doing up, and when should you get involved and when shouldn't you get involved?
Yeah, it's a great nation-loving thing, doing up. I think property's always been one of those that has inspired people, and I suppose it kind of allows them to put their own mark on it. They've got their own ideas that they want to do something with it, and of course there's that sort of concept of that you would buy a doer-upper or a fixer-upper, as you would say, at perhaps a lower price, and then add value to it. I suppose the clear thing here is adding value in the sense that it's a personal value, because obviously I've put your own mark on it. Value in the sense that you might think, well, I've bought it at perhaps a cheaper price, spend some time and energy and money on it, and then I'm going to actually have a gain on it. So that's always a big thing. And actually, probably a biggest thing in that is exactly that, because people buy things and think, right, well, if I put this and design it and add to it, I'm probably going to gain some money. Because one of the biggest key things, which I've always discussed and said on the property, is that property is the best form, if not, one of the best form, if not the best form of investment that you can ever make. And so in the UK, people tend to spend most of their life looking to buy property. That's the if it was a top 5 conversation at any dinner table, it's normally right in the top 1 or 2. Property, want to do this to it, we've done this to it, we're going to go and have an extension, we're going to add this, we're going to do a loft conversion, could put a new kitchen, new bathroom. It's always a discussion at any point, to be honest with you. I can't think of the years gone by in my own life where that hasn't been a point of discussion, apart from the fact that I'm in the business. But more than anything else, that it's just a normal thing. It's almost like an opening conversation. How's the market? Well, the market's fantastic. It's just one of those scenarios that people discuss. And so fixer-upper, do-uppers are really top of the list of what people would love to have, people want to buy, so they can add something to it from their personal point.
And I guess the big question is, in terms of your abilities from a DIY point of view. I mean, if you've got skills, if you're in the trade, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to attempt some of these major projects than it is if you don't have the skills. And I mean, there's the rub, really, isn't it?
Well, that's an interesting point, really, and the answer is absolutely right. But the problem is that it's the old adage, the guy who can do it up, who has the ability to do it up, is spending most of the time doing other people's houses up, and never gets around to doing their own fixer-upper. And there, the matrimony question mark comes in. It's like you're always out. This bathroom's not fixed. You keep telling me you're going to fix it, but you're always out doing somebody else's bathroom, but you don't do our bathroom. So it is the perfect thing, but unfortunately, it doesn't bring that person revenue. So people do like to buy these properties and do it up and sell something and make a profit on it. But the guys that can do it themselves are probably not always the best candidates for the job because they're going to spend most of their time doing somebody else's property. So you don't have to be in the business of doing it up. A lot of people that are doing property are probably not in the business, i.e., they're not actually a plumber, a developer, a decorator, a carpenter, and all the other trades that you might need. They're normally people that got money or they've got an idea in their mind. The vision that they've seen. As you say, we walk through, multi-million pound houses, or you go through hotel rooms are often a great inspiration for people, especially with the type of bathrooms that they might want and the type of rooms that they might want. Because it's often you go there and you say, "Oh, God, this would be great," and or this drapes would be great. So, people look at things like hotel rooms or big houses or stuff that they've been to, and then come back with that inspiration. Hence why things like the Ideal Home exhibition exist, because people go there in hordes to go out and get ideas of what they would love to see and dream about in their own place. So yeah, we are a nation of fixer uppers and doer uppers, definitely.
And in the study that Rightmove did, the study showed that homeowners can expect to pay around 327,000 for a doer-upper home, which is 44,000 or 12% below the current average asking price of 371,858. So there's basically a 12% saving. So 44 grand is your update price. I guess in a way, it comes down to whether you like doing that kind of work, I suppose, because I don't see the benefit, apart from the fact that presumably you're going to make it to be exactly how you want the house to be. I suppose that's the advantage. But the truth of the matter is that if you're going to spend the 12%, the 44 grand doing it up, why didn't you just buy a turnkey property in the first place?
Often the case, isn't it? It's that $1 million question. But it's really about putting the mark on it yourself. And the 12% that you are saving before you buy the property, you're going to add probably another 12%, maybe more, once you've done it up and done it up to the current standards. So there are buyers out there that would just not like to do these things up, but would like to come and buy the dream. So, for example, let's take cars for as an example. There's a second-hand car market, and there is a guaranteed every year in, year out, brand new car market. There are people that will just go to the showroom year in, year out and just say, I'd rather just buy a brand new car, because I'm not one of these people that wants to go out and find a second-hand car and take someone else's troubles. And I don't have the time, the patience, the will, or the want. And I don't have the desire. I don't want to do it. So you can imagine how many millions of cars are sold brand new. So there's lots of people that would look at brand new cars. In the same way, there's lots of people that will just go and buy brand new houses because they don't want the same issue. They'd rather just go into a new home, have the comfort, enjoy, and maybe have another passion. Their passion might be that they travel around the world, or they've got other places to go. They go to the sun sometime, and they don't want to be coming home to a leaky tap or a loo that doesn't work, or whatever that scenario might be. So there's a nation that will just prefer things that are done up, and there's another part of us that says we like to roll up our sleeves and turn around and say we want to do this ourselves because we want to add value to it. We want to put our own mark on it. We want to decorate it to the current style that I've seen in the Vogue magazine or in the New House magazine or whatever it is that that inspires people. And that is because that's their mindset. Some people are mindset of putting that together themselves, their own vision, and some people are just say, you know what, I'd rather have the comfort.
There's been a lot of talk about the price of materials and the price of trades since the pandemic. Do you think it's harder now to make a doer-upper work from a financial perspective than it was before the pandemic?
Oh, no question about it whatsoever. I mean, the cost of materials and the cost of labor has shot through the roof. It's quite shocking in terms of what costs are now involved, and you can't really almost estimate what that end result's going to be, and so therefore it is a gamble. And yes, I suppose that's where those that have some skills of their own that they can utilize. So let's say you're a carpenter yourself and you know that you can, do certain things around around the property yourself. That might help you a great deal. But if you're going to bring in a trade every single time for every single bit, first of all, there's a massive shortage of good tradespeople, huge shortage. It's not a skill that anybody wants to go into in the ideal world. I remember when we were young, we were actually taught woodwork and metalwork and all that kind of stuff at school. Well, today they teach you to sit on your butt and look on keyboards and tell you how the world is going to change. So there's a huge shortage of people that use their hands as opposed to to build things, but they use their hands to use the keyboard because the keyboard does all, or the computer says yes rather than the computer says no. So I think that I think that we've got a huge shortage of skills. Those skills come in from abroad. I mean, over the last 15, 20 years, maybe 25 even, we've had a lot of people from Eastern European where they do come in with some good skills. They're still working and they're trained to do that. But the nation in the UK is probably now sitting on their butt and hoping that it's just going to be done on the keyboard. So, because of the shortage of those skills, the cost of hiring those people, it's the supply and demand again, Paul. We talk about supply and demand all the time on our show, and supply and demand is that we don't have the supply of good quality, and I underline quality tradespeople. There are lots of would-be doer-uppers and people that would say that they could do it, and sometimes they're misleading. And unfortunately, if you don't know better, you end up having to have those people at your door doing those things, and then you find that you've got to find another one who's actually going to come up and sort out Budget and Scarpet. So because Budget and Scarpet came along, did what they thought they were going to do, charged you, and then you've got to bring in someone who's actually knows it. So that's a huge ask now to get the right skills in, and that's expensive. And of course, materials have gone way over the top. In fact, some cases, some parts, even though COVID is now 4 years gone by, we are still behind in supply of some materials that you can't get because it just stopped in its stride, and all of a sudden there wasn't enough materials about.
Taking on a fixer-upper is a prospect that many home hunters remain open to, whether it's renters looking to buy their first home or homeowners looking to take the next step up the property ladder. In the Rightmove survey, of 34,000 people, they asked why home movers would be swayed towards a fixer-upper home. For those currently renting, 73% were motivated by the opportunity to potentially purchase a property at a lower price, while the same percentage of homeowners said the opportunity to create their perfect home would be the main motivator. So, as you said, it's basically there to make it your own, put your own stamp on it. More than half, 57% of renters and homeowners also considered a renovation project as an opportunity to improve the energy efficiency of the home they were buying, which could result in a longer-term drop in energy bills. I mean, thinking about things like that, loft insulation, cavity wall and so on, they're things that you can bring a company in to do. I mean, you could do the loft insulation yourself, but cavity wall, you're going to bring a company in. And I suppose to some extent, those are sensible improvements because they're going to cut your bills over the long term.
That's true. And even looking at the cavity wall installation part of it, just for this discussion, over the years, there have been companies that have come along and did cavity wall installations. And it's just a case of, perhaps sticking a hole in your wall and filling it up with some foam or something like that. But the reality of it is that not all of them were correctly trained or skilled. And sometimes those cavity wall installations have ultimately ended up costing more than they were costing in the first place. So, you really got to pick your tradespeople with the right credentials to make sure that they get the right warranties and so forth and the right training on how to do it. The thing with the structure in the United Kingdom is that we have such a varying structure of properties. Excuse me. And what you have to bear in mind is that the standard construction is bricks and tile, and obviously some structure of timber in there. But there have been properties, new built properties over the last 30, 40 years that have been built, which were built on various different structures. For example, there were steel frame constructions where people bought put steel frames on it around a property, and then all of a sudden maybe some breeze blocks, and then a bit of cladding, and that made it easier. And yes, it was nice, but it had so much gap between them. Somebody came along and then filled it with some cavity wall that then exploded the cracks in the thing, because the foam maybe expanded more than it was supposed to expand, and all these other technical things that happen afterwards create an issue. And we don't have a standard fix. I mean, we got properties in the United Kingdom dating back centuries, let alone hundreds of years. We got literally centuries of properties that have been built. Our castles, our things have been there a long, long time, and not everybody in the modern world knows how to deal with those specific structures and those styles of structures, and therefore not always any modern technology, any modern inventions for perhaps making a more warmer home, or filling out the cavity, or doing the installation, or adding whatever you need to reduce emission, or reduce the heat going out of your house, is a real ask in some of those types of properties in some parts of the country. And that's why I'll go back to our conversation at the beginning, that sometimes people just prefer to buy brand new because they just don't want all of that hassle. They don't understand it. It's like buying a doer upper or a fixer upper, Paul, which might be listed, for example. Some people don't understand what listed means, and some people do understand what listed means. I've known of properties where somebody bought, and they perhaps have come into the country, bought in a listed property, and then thought they could do whatever they wanted to do it, and then spent the next 2 years spending more money trying to redo it because they did it wrong, because they didn't know what to do. They just took out the walls that they thought they needed to do, until the listing officer came along and said, "Excuse me, you can't do that. There's a law against that." There's so much in this doer upper, fixer upper role that you need to study and understand before you actually roll your sleeves up and get in there and say, "I'm going to do this."
And then there's the other conundrum, of course, which is the sort of permitted development rights and so forth. So, the notion that you can extend the back of a property up to 4 meters and 3 meters high, excuse me, and you can do that without planning permission, and therefore you think, a lot of people will think, well, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that, I don't have to ask anybody for permission. But you can fall very foul very quickly with these things, and not least, even if you're just moving interior walls around, you're going to have building control look at these things.
That's right. I mean, it's the structure and the weight of the structure. All the SAP calculations that they've got to do to support the actual walls, is to make sure the roof is aligned correctly and so forth. Because one thing off key can actually create a problem. Excuse me, it may not be instantly, but it might be over the years. All of a sudden, that corner has been weighted too much, for example, with a section, and that starts to fall into the ground, and then that creates a crack, and then you got issues all around. So yeah, I mean, if you just looked at fixer up as an aesthetic, i.e., go in there, color the walls a different color, put the new flooring down, add a new kitchen. So that is a different fixer upper. But sometimes, and I suppose the hidden thing about these fixer uppers, Paul, is the fact that it's not until you take it down you realize what you've actually taken down. Start a huge new section. So, for example, back in the old days, there used to people have these massive, I don't know, you probably remember them, these thick, quarry tiles stuck on the walls in the bathroom or on the floor and so forth. And they were fantastic. They were sturdy. They did the job. You take one of those tiles off the wall and you've taken half the wall off, because they were put in there with cement and bloody concrete, and so you think, oh, I'll just tip this off, and once you chip it off, the next thing you know, you've chipped the entire wall off, and behind that wall is something else, and that now has to be redone because that's rotten because of the water that's been seeping through the back, and before you know it, you've got your whole. So sometimes what looks good to the naked eye, it is probably best not to touch it, because that you think you're going to spend £1,000 and you just added another 2,000 because all the stuff at the back of it's gone. So costing is a huge thing in door uppers, and it's often that's where people fall foul, because they end up having to find the money, and then the job stops in the middle because you run out of money, and so it's half a door upper And as long as it's only done half, then you've not achieved anything. You haven't added value. In fact, anything, you've taken away value by actually touching it in the first place. Because now you've got to put it back together before you can actually get out of it.
I've actually found, or not even found, a bathroom fitter that will actually take down tiles. They always want to put tiles on top of tiles, just because it's a simpler and easier task, as you probably outline. And then, of course, there's the issue with your builder that you've got to be really careful about, which, of course, is the overage bit. So, in other words, it just depends. And they use this caveat so often now, don't they? Well, we can only say it's going to be round this price because we don't know until we get in there what we're going to find. And then, of course, the next thing you know, there's extras added on. And I actually read that recently it's wise, if you've got a project that's £100,000, you need another 100,000 for potential overspends.
Oh, definitely. I mean, this is what I'm saying. You don't realize until you've actually tapped that tile off the wall that all of a sudden you've got this new hidden extra problem, and that's going to cost money. And so there is a part of a doer-upper which you can say is aesthetic and you can just fix it up and without having to do too much. But there is a huge part of the doer-uppers that people touch sometimes and then regret touching it. I know personally that I've done that myself. I've looked at things and I thought, well, we'll just do that bit, and then well, that bit leads to the next bit, and because the next bit doesn't look right, then you got your lady of the house sort of saying, well, actually, we should have done this bit because now that doesn't. I'd rather you just not touched it in the first place, but you've moaned most of the time because it doesn't look right for the time when you didn't touch it. Now you did touch it, it comes, and it's just an ongoing issue that you've got to be. So my advice is that think very, very carefully about the fixer uppers, take the costing into consideration seriously, look at it properly, and make sure that you've costed it right and you have the funds to do it. If not, it's almost probably better not to do it, and not start something that you can't finish.
I suppose, in a way, you could consider, if you're prepared to sort of, I suppose, slum it to some extent, you could sort of do some basic stuff as you move in, and then over the next couple of years, with some people getting an annual bonus, you could spend your annual bonus on doing the next part of it. There isn't this need to get to house perfect within 3 months of moving in.
No, that's true, and that is often the case. But the problem with the section by section is that as you do a section by section, you don't always you get the wow factor for that small section, but you don't get the wow factor of what you feel you want to achieve as a whole, because by the time you get round to the other one and you get your next bonus to do the next bit, the first bit is now probably going to be dated. It's not going to be an annual thing that you're going to do, because I'm sure you'll want to go and spend some of your bonus on perhaps a nice holiday or something else that you might want to do. So, it might be a 5-6 year project, but in 5-6 years' time, what you did 5-6 years ago becomes old. And the problem with all of that is, and I've seen it again, physically over the years, you do a decorating of one room, and as soon as you've done the architrave of the front door of that room, the rest of the house starts to look dated because that one is shinier and it's whiter and it's cleaner, and so then you want to sort of maybe do another bit of coat for the one that's in the corridor, and then the next one, and then it just goes on to where do you stop and where do you start. And it's the same as carpeting or flooring. You do one room and then you think, oh well, that looks really nice in there, but now I wish I'd continued over there because that would have been that. So it's a mindset. It's a great thing to do. I'm not saying it's not, because people have been doing it for generations, and long may they carry on doing it. But the answer really is that you should just calculate it and think very carefully about the areas that you want to do, and be more methodical than probably emotional as to what it needs to look like at the end.
I suppose then the last question on all of that is, what is the top three most profitable improvements you can make? Would it be conservatory? Would it be going into the loft? Would it be new kitchen? Would it be new bathroom? What, in your view, what are the top three that are going to add the most value to your property?
I think that bathroom and kitchens are a given, that they are everyday use. And you always want to make sure that they are the current. Things like loft conversions, if you start to do a loft conversion, then you've really got to plan to do the whole house, because whoever does the loft conversion is going to make a mess at the top of the house, and is going to drag that right the way through the rest of the house. It's not as if somebody's going to come along and take the roof off and then fix it all up, put the roof back on. They're not all going to do the access from the outside. They're going to do the whole thing from the inside. I remember advising an uncle recently, I say recently, it was now probably about 10 years ago, maybe more. We had that discussion, and the discussion was that, what shall I do? I said, well, if you're going to do a loft conversion, you better think about doing the whole house. And because, we walked through it and said, if you did this, this will need doing. If you did this, this will need doing, and so forth and so forth. And he goes, you know what? I never thought about that. I just thought they'll go up to the loft, put a new loft ladder in and start working out. I said, but they're going to walk through your house. Every time they walk through, something's going to damage. Something's going to, you got to get your dust. You got to get your new carpet, and it's just going to be, before you know it, you're going to say, oh well, I want this done, I want that. So I think that's a big expense. If you do a loft conversion, you've got to really think about it. But something that's going to add immediate value, normally a kitchen and bathroom.
Yeah, kitchen, bathrooms, loft conversions. But I'm also hearing that now conservatories is a detractor as opposed to a potential riser in the value of a property.
Well, conservatories could be a detractor because they do add space, but they don't always add the comfort that you are requiring. So the idea is great. I think you've got to take it to the next stage of the conservatory, perhaps to play on words, that maybe more of an orangery than a conservatory, where part of your structure is going to be a proper structure as opposed to a UPVC or PVC structure. So you've got to think about those actual structure points that are important. So when you look at conservatories per se, they might be built on a small foundation because they're not a permanent structure. They haven't created a proper foundation, dug the right levels to make sure that it's sturdy, and then to make sure that the infrastructure that is now on that foundation is of good quality. Now, when the conservatories were originally brought in, the idea was that they were more of a sun lounge, a sun room of some sort for a short while. But unfortunately, we have so little sun in the United Kingdom that they don't really serve their purposes. So they become a cold room for what it's worth. And you don't want to go in there, and normally it's housing lots of other things. So it becomes just another storage area. You've got to have those conservatories turned into a proper room. And of course, to do a proper room, you'll need planning permission, though under permitted development rights, that has now been eradicated. You can build up and around a certain amount without the planning permission, but you still probably require some sort of building regulations.
I see a lot of adverts online for people who have these companies that can change the glass roof on a conservatory to a proper tiled roof. Have you any experience of whether they work or not, or whether that's worthwhile doing?
Yeah, I've actually looked into that myself, and the problem only becomes on the weight, because the structure that you've got in a conservatory is a structure being created around the UPVC, the plastic that they make the conservatory, and the glass that they put into it. And all of a sudden, if you're going to put tiles on top, they may come back and say to you, oh yeah, the tiles are just as same weight, same light, same sort of structure that you need. But I think that the infrastructure that it starts, like I said, the foundations have got to be sturdy enough to be able to take the weight of the tiles and that structure before you actually venture into it. And you might find that you left yourself open if you do that, and then find that the base structure isn't good, because the weight will start to push the whole thing into the ground a bit further.
Important to take sensible advice on that. Just to wrap up the Doer Upper feature this week, and the Rightmove survey did list the top 10 areas where the most fixer-uppers are currently for sale. Top of that list is Ceredigion in Wales, with 4.2% of the market on sale for fixer-upper people. Lincoln is next in the East Midlands, and it's Carmarthenshire, Denbighshire, Gloucester, Hastings in the southeast, interesting, and then Slough comes in at number 7, Joe. Any thoughts on fixer-uppers in Slough?
Slough itself is ready for a fixer-upper, let alone the amount of fixer-uppers that it needs to have. So I'm surprised it didn't feature in the top rather than the seventh place. As a town that probably needs to be fixed up, let alone the fixer-up. But yes, there are opportunities around Slough that fixer-uppers can happen. My thing about fixer-ups, and I just want to put it out there, is not just always about the fixer-uppers or the properties. You have to understand that, and I've said this a billion times now, that if it hasn't got curb appeal, it really becomes irrelevant in my book of what you do inside. Because if somebody doesn't like it from when they arrive outside, then the only person that really benefits the inside is you, the person that's actually done it for your own eyes, for your own aesthetics, for your own sort of gain to say, I've achieved something, this is great, it's my home inside, and I love it. But if you're looking to add value, then adding value from the exterior, outside, maintaining through gardens, driveways, etc., and to make sure your neighbours' properties are to some level, a similar sort of level, is what will actually add the real value. Because if you can't sell the property in the later days after you put all the time and money and energy into it to someone who comes up and says, wow, I want to live here, then it's a hard sell, it's an upsell, because you've got to get them through that front door and then get them inside and say, look, oh yes, you've done something really nice. Your bathroom, your kitchen looks really good. You've got nice flooring, etc. But I always say that, it doesn't matter what town, country, where you are, if it doesn't look right, the first 10 seconds of the outside, I don't think you're really going to be making a huge mark inside.
So, in conclusion, then, Joe, do we think it's worth doing a fixer-upper, or do you think we should just stick to the turnkey?
No, I think there's definitely margin in doing up. We just got to be cautious as to how much we spend and how we actually do it, and what advice you get. So take on good advice, make sure that you do finish the project. It's no good starting a fixer upper and leaving it halfway. Then it becomes not a fixer upper and not a finisher upper. It's a nowhere, isn't it, really? And with that, you will live for many days, and ultimately somebody else will get the gain. So you really need to think hard about how much you want to spend and how you want to do it.
Indeed. And that wraps up this week's Property Matters, a bit of a doer-upper special. And we'll be back with another Property Matters very soon.